good morning, depending upon where you're joining us from. Really happy to have everybody here. Very excited about this panel today. We have assembled a group of experts and leaders in the robotics industry to talk about how to think about partnerships in building our businesses and being successful in our respective markets. If we haven't met before, my name is Joel Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Robotics Network. We represent one of the world's largest robotics communities. I've been telling the story that many people know about Carnegie Mellon University's leadership in computer science, robotics research and development, and artificial intelligence. But why we really exist, because lesser is known about the breadth and the depth of Pittsburgh's commercial community. The PRN has over 100 members. Our companies represent nearly 18 different industry segments, 9 of which we have 5 companies or more in those segments. So with all of this, we actually consider Pittsburgh to be the robotics capital of the world. And it is our mission to connect many of you in the audience today and the partners that we work with this rapidly growing industry base. And it's our goal that we're going to work together to continue to accelerate the overall adoption of autonomous systems in this wide variety of industries verticals. So check us out. Ways that you can connect with us. You can go to our website at robopgh.org. You can also find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Our Twitter and LinkedIn channels are shown here, and we can put those in the chat. The beauty of doing this virtually is that you can multitask. Go to Twitter and LinkedIn and follow us right now. I am watching those signups. I ask you to please do it at this moment. Okay, so about the event. As I mentioned, we have a very important topic, one that's talked about quite a bit, but maybe not as well understood. So we're going to talk about, I'm really pleased to have our panelists that are shown here, John Sanagate, Peter Seif, Greg Cronin, and Justin Ritter. It really is a fantastic panel. So I'm going to try to move through these introductory comments quickly so we can hear more from them in the conversation. Just know that today's webinar is part of the Pittsburgh Robotics Network Robotics Business Spotlight Series, where we aim to highlight business challenges, successes, and even the failures in the robotics field as we're growing this industry together. It is an emerging industry. Thus, it is really important to bring experts like our panel today to discuss how we accelerate our businesses and the industry. Before we start, I want to recognize our leading sponsors. These organizations listed here are the Pittsburgh robotics community, and they're just a small sample of a very large community. They are leaders in their respective industries, including research and development, such as Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh. They focus on business growth, such as the Denton's law firm and JP Morgan, and also representing the autonomous industry, and notably the autonomous vehicle industry, which has a strong concentration and is one of the leaders worldwide right here in Pittsburgh. And from our sponsors, we have Argo AI and Aurora. I would like to recognize today's presenting sponsor, Lucas Systems. Lucas Systems, if you don't know them, please go to their website and check them out right now. This is a Pittsburgh company that helps logistics and supply chain companies transform their distribution center operations, helping these customers be more efficient and agile during what is right now a period of great change, where we as consumers are moving to buy more items online than we ever have before. Their system, Jennifer, different from our own Jennifer, increases worker efficiency and improves overall operational accuracy and alleviates a very big problem in this industry and like other industries of labor scarcity. And so they have an AI-based software that is built upon 23 plus years of deep process expertise. So Jennifer, the product, helps orchestrate improvement across warehouses and the supply chain. Thank you very much, Lucas, for supporting us and being a part of today's conversation. Now, finally, I'm going to introduce our moderator for today, the human Jennifer, or Jen Apacella. She is our very own as a part of the Pittsburgh Robotics Network. And she is not only many things in helping the PRN in its growth and development, but also to our community. She has been a leader in developing a strong network. She is a founder, she's a speaker, collaborator, skilled facilitator, and very much community oriented and an advocate for a number of important issues. For us, she serves as the program director of the Pittsburgh Robotics Network. She also founded and still maintains an organization called Build 412 Tech, which is a really refreshing network of tech industry professionals that has been growing rapidly within the Pittsburgh region. And Jen also serves as the president of the board for the nonprofit Pittsburgh chapter of Get With It Pittsburgh, which is a women in technology organization. Professionally, Jen worked across many disciplines in both large and small tech companies, but notably, she spent a majority of her career at IBM, applying strong business strategy and leadership skills in the area of business development, global program management, and enterprise solution sales. So her work there and the work that she has done in the community is very appropriate for today's topic. So Jen is going to lead our esteemed panel through today's webinar. Jen, it's all yours.
Thank you, Joel, for that lovely introduction. Welcome all of you who've joined us today, and welcome to our panelists. We're going to have a fantastic discussion, and I'm going to get right into it. So partnerships strategically are so important for business growth and for a variety of other reasons, including customer success. I think they're the bread and butter for growth and for just really getting to understand customers and for organizations. And so we're very pleased today to be joined by this fantastic panel. So I'm going to just go down, you see before you with their faces, and you're gonna hear from them directly. We've got John Santigate, who is the Vice President of Robotics at Körber Supply Chain. And in this role, John's responsible for defining and executing the autonomous mobile robot strategy for Körber Supply Chain in North America. And prior to joining Körber, he was no stranger to robotics. He was the research director for robotics at IDC, where he provided market trends and forecasts for service robotics, business process evolution through the use of service robots and integration of robotics into business processes and business IT architecture. So thank you for joining us, John. We're also joined by Peter Seif, who is the CEO of ST Engineering Athon. Peter oversees all aspects of the company operations, including engineering, manufacturing, sales, and support, and has worked in robotics for over 25 years. So we are very, very thankful to have you join us today. We've also got Greg Cronin on the panel today, and Greg is an internationally recognized leader in operations and strategy for both physical operations and software and hardware technology companies. And he's got a strong track record of rapidly growing enterprises, whether it be a startup or a billion-dollar company. So we're very thankful to have Greg join this conversation today. And then last but certainly not least, we've got Justin Ritter, who leads, I'm sorry, I forgot to say, Greg is with I Am Robotics. He's an advisor and investor with I Am Robotics, which is one of our Pittsburgh headquartered robotics companies. Justin Ritter is with Lucas Systems, and he is the VP of Operations and Customer Success, where he leads the solution design, project engineering, delivery, and support teams. That's a lot of work, with overall responsibility for the successful implementation of their warehouse optimization solutions at distribution centers worldwide. So thank you all so much for joining us. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we're going to go right into this panel discussion. So welcome. What I wanted to do to start, why don't we kick things off? I'd love for each of the panelists to just share briefly, just a minute or two, high-level overview. If you could help our attendees and those listening in understand a little bit about your organization. and not just, what we'd see on a website for your organization, but help us understand the solutions and the industry areas that you really serve in and that you, have sort of a focus on. And we can kick things off. Why don't we start with Peter? Peter, could you go ahead and start?
Sure thing. Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks to the Pittsburgh Robotics Network for sponsoring and hosting this event. This is great. So ST Engineering Athon, we make and manufacture autonomous mobile robots where we specialize in what we would describe as very challenging unstructured environments. And unstructured is a word that's used a lot in this industry to mean lack of infrastructure for navigation, but we also deploy our robots in very public places. So hospitals and hotels are two of our primary markets. And given that we either don't want to or can't make accommodations in the building for the robots to operate, we need to operate in and around people in a very natural way in order to achieve the results that we're trying to achieve for our customers. And that can be challenging, but that's our specialty. And in those two markets, what we do is we support most of the logistics activities that occur in those buildings, everything from what most people might expect around medications and laboratory specimens, all the way to food, linen, trash, medical waste. And there you can start to see the crossover between those two markets and why they're good targets for us. We are deployed in several hundred facilities, mostly in the US, but I did a double count this morning and we're in about 12 countries throughout the world. So,
excellent. Well, thanks so much for that. Greg, would you mind going next and just give us an understanding of what, for people who aren't familiar with IM Robotics, who they are, what they do, who their customers are, that type of thing.
Sure. Thank you. And again, thanks, Jen, and thanks to the Pittsburgh Robotic Network. Joel, in particular, thank you very much for having us today. IM is a team of and a mix of robot and automation experts. We've been addressing logistics and supply chain problems for many years. You can tell many years on my part. We focus on e-commerce and manufacturing solutions. So we're focused in those areas. IM to date has created two different robots. The initial one that we developed was Swift, an autonomous mobile manipulation robot, AMMR. That's quite a mouthful. It's a piece-picking autonomous robot, which is probably one of the most difficult types of robots that you can develop. We've also created Bolt, and that's an autonomous mobile robot, or an AMR. Offers unmatched power and safety. Bolt can work 20 hours in one charge. It's ideal for multiple shift operations, especially during peak periods. We have designed Bolt where it can have multiple toppers, conveyor topper, for instance, where Bolt can be utilized as a transport vehicle, but also can interact with conveyor systems. IM only has just a few customers to date and integrators, so we've intentionally gone at a pace where we can learn more from our partners. So we're still at a learning stage in order to better commercialize our products. So we're still early, but we're ready pretty soon to really move into a number of different directions with new products.
Excellent. Thank you for that overview. Appreciate that. John, would you be able to share a little bit with us about, so we can understand a little more about Körber?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Joel and PRN for having us and hosting this event here today. Körber Supply Chain is a provider of end-to-end supply chain execution technologies. We're not a producer or manufacturer of robotic technologies. We're actually best known for our software applications. I joined the Körber organization by way of what was formerly known as High Jump Software, leading provider of warehouse management applications. And today, we've rebranded a series of acquisitions, 12 different companies that cover all aspects of supply chain execution, from warehouse management to labor management, transportation management, layer picking robotics, palletization robotics, integration, technology integration services, and the like, to really become a complete end-to-end provider of this technology area. As a part of that portfolio of offerings, we do have a autonomous mobile robotics practice. That's where I spend my time working with our channel partners to allow us to help our customers deploy and deliver the best fit mobile robotic solutions for their applications, and how that ties. And we really, where we differentiate ourselves is really tying together the broad suite of applications that we deliver. We're not really a point-based solution organization. We really are a portfolio-driven organization that has the unique ability to look across workflows within a customer environment and seek to really drive optimization more broadly than any one point solution would do on its own.
Excellent. Very helpful. Thank you. And then Justin, could you share a little bit with us about Lucas Systems?
Sure. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Joel. Lucas Systems provides optimization solutions in the warehousing and distribution space. Our customers cross all industries, retail, food and beverage, manufacturing, medical, industrial parts, and e-commerce operations. We have deployments across the world, across 400 plus sites. And really what our customers are looking for are benefits within productivity, accuracy, and training for new associates, which is really important these days given the high turnover in the space. Our solution includes all the execution needs wall to wall. So that includes a multimodal interface that runs on a mobile device for associates on the floor. That also includes voice. There's also tools for the DC leadership to better manage the operation. And then we provide AI-based optimization to orchestrate all of the work. This suite also includes machine learning tools to assist with slotting and workforce management problems. You've heard of Jennifer. She's the brain and the voice of our solution that the users interact with. And also when I talk about work orchestration, that includes robotics as well. So we've recently expanded to partnerships in that space.
Excellent. Really helpful. And the purpose of that question really was, well, one, and Joel touched on it earlier too, the depth and breadth of the different kinds of companies that we have represented here, but all with a common thread, right? Each and every one of you in your organizations utilizes partnerships in a strategic way to grow your businesses, connect with customers, just become better in the business world overall. And so to that point, right, well, let's talk a little bit about partnerships. So, some of us may be familiar with just the concept of a partnership in general, right? It's a relationship, right? The relationship is aligned, it's usually mutually beneficial. And being that it's a business relationship, it usually means that there's something in common or something that each side can help the other with. When it comes to robotics, sometimes these types of solutions can be a little complex, right? Because there's an intelligent automated machine usually involved somehow. And then there's also software, and there's data, then there's design, human interaction, supply chain. There's so many considerations. So with that, why don't we touch on the different types of partnerships that each of your organizations utilize? I'd like to start this question with John, mostly because Corber, as an end-to-end solution provider, right? Some of the technology you own, right? Some of the software you own, some of it you partner with and resell. There's also a component of integration. And why don't you just share a little bit about the types of partnerships that you all focus on?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question, Jennifer. And I guess when you think broadly about the channel ecosystems, right? There, as you mentioned, there are different types of partnerships. I'll start with how we address our mobile robotics practice and those sorts of partnerships, and then briefly touch on some of the other approaches, because it does depend on where you sit sort of in the partnership hierarchy, right? How you might structure a relationship. So with our autonomous mobile robotics practice, as I mentioned before, we're not a manufacturer of robots, right? What we do is we've built out a portfolio of partnerships with several different vendors of autonomous mobile robots, each of which we view as having specific fitness for workflows that our customers require. And through those partnerships, we have several elements. First is the reseller element, right? We are resellers of the products that our partners provide. So we define solutions, we collaborate with the vendor partners to make sure we've got the right size solution for our customers, and then we buy it from the partner and then sell it to our customers. But it certainly doesn't stop there, right? There's the integration element, Jen. I think you touched on it briefly there, right? The relationship between the software, the process, and the data is far more critical than the physical aspect of what a robot can do. A robot is really designed to go from, point A to point B, or, point A, B, C, whatever that mix is. But it can't do that efficiently without, tie into the business architecture, what the software elements are that sort of help orchestrate and define the workflows, and then the ability to capture and communicate bidirectionally the data that's passing and occurring throughout the course of that action. And so we do software integrations with our vendor partners as well. And many times one of the questions that we get asked is, does that mean we can only, get robots from you if we're using your WMS systems, right? And that's actually, that's a hard no. We do have customers that are using competitive environments because we are very good at what we do in designing and doing the integrations. And so again, the range of the partnerships is reselling and integration, but then also innovation. We do collaborate with our partners to develop IP, whether it's software or process related IP, that allows us to identify maybe specific workflows or sort of specific use cases that we can then go and proactively position to the market. And then just real quickly, in the interest of time here, more broadly, that's sort of our AMR partner approach, right? Find the vendors that we want to work with and then structure ourselves to be able to go and deliver those technologies. But we have partners, companies that are doing management consulting, the Deloittes of the world, that partner with Kerber to be able to recommend our solutions to their customers. We have hardware vendor partners, companies like Zebra and Honeywell. We're the largest distributor of voice technology in the world. We don't make the voice technology. We just know how to deliver it for our customers. And so we've got the largest providers of that technology that we partner with to acquire their hardware and tie our own solutions into. So it is within the context of Kerber, it's quite a complex partner ecosystem that we've sort of assembled for ourselves that really breaks itself down by products and solution areas when you come down to it. But all of those relationships are really designed around the ability to sell, implement, and then more importantly, collaborate and innovate with our vendor partners.
Excellent. Thank you for that. That's, I think, really helpful. Now, Greg, if we go to you for IM Robotics, so you've got a slightly different angle. You're coming at this partnership sort of approach from as an actual robotics organization. So why don't you share with us what partnerships look like for you?
Certainly, thank you. Well, at the start of the pandemic, we knew at IM that it was going to be very difficult to try to sell robots out in the field. And in my history, my experiences in the past, at times of financial stress or problems like that, for instance, the dot-com bubble burst back in the early 2000s, although you might remember that, and the 2007 financial disaster. It was interesting. My experience has been that technology companies sort of came together because it was a difficult market to sell. And let's figure out how we can improve our products together. So from that moment on, we knew that really collaboration with partners was probably our best step forward and the best way to go. And that's what we're doing right now. We're in the process. We're working very closely with True Automation. They're a conveyor and WES provider. And we've had a very successful collaboration with them where we've built toppers on top of our AMR base that we can integrate with their conveyor systems. So not only can you use us for conveyance of products, but we can deliver it to a conveyance system. So it's that type of collaboration is important as we go forward. I think everybody knows that creating robots is difficult. It's not for the faint of heart. It's something that takes time and patience. And reliability is actually probably the number one thing in a robot. It's got to be up 99.99% of the time at least. And that is an extremely difficult thing to do. And then also robots need to be people safe and efficient, providing the right ROI. So we have taken the step of working with our integrated partners, and we're in this process right now of putting them out in the field, learning how to best utilize these robots, and where do we go from there? So we're really at that point right now, and we're out there actively looking for integrator and founding customers who might be interested in working with us because we'd like to build something together with them. Obviously, partnerships is strategic to IM. We realize that's our future, and that's the best way, because we are a point solution. We're not a total solution like John and his company has. We are just a point solution, and we need to integrate with others to be able to be successful.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's actually a really great, I think, transition to Justin here, because Justin, from your perspective at Lucas Systems, you're coming at it from another perspective, right? This is another fun alternative perspective. You're not in the business of robots at all there. Why don't you share a little bit about how you partner with in the robotics industry and what your partnerships look like?
Sure. So we work with a host of other partners in the supply chain space, as it's a complex ecosystem. So we're dealing with people like independent consultants to large scale integrators and even other automation solution companies. In working with one, we saw that there was a joint opportunity to apply robotics, and that's how we were introduced to Fetch, who we recently announced a partnership right here at the beginning of August. It helps us to have that partnership to provide the expertise to our customers who look to us for domain expertise, as well as the key partner for technology in their warehouse. Just speaking for the customers who use our solution and are looking at all kinds of different technology in the distribution space, they're not even really sure where to start. So a lot of the concerns that we hear are around integration, the data flow that John had mentioned, the difficulty of the integration, and then even from a use case perspective, how it fits into what they have currently automated in their DC and how that impacts their people that are currently doing the work. So with this partnership, we've been able to expand on how robotics fits and also shorten an otherwise longer design and engineering discussion that would take place. And we have a proven interface now and use cases on how robotics can be applied. From Lucas's perspective, we're providing automation solutions for users on the floor, voice-directed picking, other optimization tools that are provided as part of our solution. We do see robotics as part of the future of automation and warehousing and distribution, but the key part is working in harmony with all the other manual processes that are still going to involve people, especially depending on the scale of the operation. Our customers range from smaller privately held companies with one warehouse in less than 100,000 square feet to large Fortune 100 companies across tens and 20s of warehouses in the US for their distribution footprint. So everybody's looking to stay on the cutting edge and stay competitive, and we're able to help them with our robotics partners.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. So that brings up an interesting, I think, spot here for talking about partnerships that are slightly different, right? So a lot of the partnerships you all just touched on are related to marketing, sales, integration, data. But I think there are other spaces that still lead to customer success and help the solutions overall, maybe a little more non-traditional or not often talked about partnerships. I know, Peter, would you be able to maybe share a little bit about how Aethon leverages partnerships and how you touch on that space?
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to. Maybe just a little bit of history on why we ended up going down this road. So yeah, we're a little bit different. We don't really have any, I guess I would describe them as direct channel partnerships. So from the beginning, we decided that we would, build and design our robots, including the software side. We would sell them, we would install them, and we would maintain them ourselves. And I think a lot of what went into that decision was the fact that the markets that we're in, this is probably their first robot and probably their first piece of automation equipment related to logistics, right? So we felt this would lower the friction for adoption in those markets to be able to deal with somebody who was going to provide that breadth of services, and the customer didn't have to, string those together. We obviously think that it's worked well for us, over the years, and given us a lot of experience, and it's been a great feedback loop for helping us, design new robots since we have our hands on them all the time. But obviously, we probably wouldn't be a good panelist if we had no partnership. So we definitely have partnerships. We've just thought about them differently. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how do we improve the adoption of robotics? This is probably one of those markets that's just been, the promise has been there for so long, and it really just hasn't been fulfilled yet. And when we look at it, there's so many things that are required to use a robot. and even hours. So for instance, in our case, while we can deliver the entire robotic solution, our robots do use carts, right? So most of the logistics that's performed in the buildings that we operate in relies on carts, linen carts, trash carts, et cetera. So we've partnered with cart companies so that we can make them more compatible with robots or certain features, right? Or things about the cart that would make them work better with a robot. Something as simple as the caster design, which are the swivel casters, which are fixed casters, things that you normally don't think about unless you do this thousands and thousands of times. So we have partnered with cart companies to come up with those types of features that make them work better with automated solutions. And it's been really a good two-way solution. So they are able to provide carts to our customers that work, direct from the factory, and they're able to say that they have robot-ready carts, right? Which is a pretty good, marketing value proposition for them. And we've done the same thing with the elevator companies. And again, while we can deploy robots that will work in these buildings without the elevator company, they won't be able to change floors, right? Most of our customers have elevators, and we used to approach this. I'll say through brute force. We decided to take control over this, and we would build our own elevator controllers. Well, now, again, in order to lower the friction and improve adoption in these markets, we want to make it easy for our customers to enable their elevators to use robots. So we've worked with them on some software integration and controls. And again, what's interesting about this is that what's developed is that now the elevator companies can market their products as robot ready as well. And, again, just as interesting is that whether it's the cart company or the elevator company, we actually have customers in common. Almost every one of our buildings has an elevator, right? So even though we didn't approach it this way, it's now developed into, the possibility for us to co-market and co-sell alongside each other. And another thing, it's something more recent, so I'll mention this too, something that, you really don't think about it until you've had some customers that have had their robots for a long time, is what do you do with all the batteries, right? All of our robots, I assume, run on batteries, and at some point you need to replace all these batteries. And for years, we would just have them ship them back to us so we could make sure that they were disposed of safely and in an environmentally responsible way. But it obviously involved a lot of shipping and other logistics costs. So now we've actually, we have a partner that will pick up and recycle the batteries directly from the customer site. So a little bit different, maybe indirect channel partnerships, but partnerships nevertheless that I think are important in terms of improving the adoption of robotics.
Definitely. And I think something that's a common thread between all of you, regardless of industry or, who uses, which industry is adopting them, maybe more quickly or not quickly, or if it's end to end or a point solution. At the end of the day, it seems like all of you are focused on the customer, which is a good thing. And so it seems like partnerships at the end of the day are really focused on customer success. And there are different ways you can go about doing that. So that being said, right, partnerships in general take a lot of time, and time is a very valuable resource. It's a precious resource. And so when you go forward and you're looking at different kinds of partnerships and you're thinking about, okay, let's define it, let's manage it, let's set something up, put a partner program in place. What would you say, besides the customer, being happy, what are some of the key values or benefits that your organization said, yes, this is worth pursuing, we're going to do this, let's move forward? And anyone can take this. This is now an open discussion, so we can sort of have people jump in and out as they'd like.
Oh, yeah.
Jen.
Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Hey, I'll start and I'll pass it off to John. From Lucas's perspective, our customers are looking to us to, provide expertise on the latest and greatest technology in the warehousing space. So for us to have that know-how around how robotics can fit and getting that from our robotics partners, we're able to have a lot of those conversations and lead them through their own discovery process much quicker than, say, having them do the research, them trying to reach out to individual companies. We're able to be the connective glue with the complex ecosystem that sometimes they're having challenges navigating.
Excellent. John, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I guess for us, right, it was at the core of it, it was about a strategy. It was about the customer, right? When we embarked on this effort, it was something that had been talked about for several years, right? The emergence of autonomous mobile robots in the warehouse and fulfillment center meant that those robotics vendors that were selling their tools were selling to the customers that we had, right? And so we looked at the customer base and said, how can we do more for our customers in ways that are relatable to what they need and allow us to expand our portfolio and be a better partner for our customers. And so the AMR vendor partnership sort of came about as a, it was a technology area that was at the right time. We had the right customers, and they were going to be in our customer base anyway, and our customers were looking at this technology. So how do we make it a better process for the buyer? Now, the related value proposition there, I mean, we've continued to evolve the way in which we do business. We've added opportunity. We do have the opportunity to do things for our customers that we didn't have to do before. But more importantly, we're collaborating with our vendor partners to drive innovative solutions that don't exist at a broad scale here today. And so at the core of it, again, it is, as you mentioned, it's about doing what's best for the customer, but how can we do that in a way that's scalable across the market? And so we work with our partners to identify those scalable opportunities, to collaborate, make joint investments, and then help solve, the big problems that the customers have.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, I think, so it's agreed upon, right? Partnerships do ultimately benefit customers, and some of you have shared some examples there. So now when we have some earlier stage companies who are looking to get started with partnerships, right? And so they're thinking about, okay, how do I get started? What strategic approach do I take? Right. So their strategy is, how do I get my solution adopted more readily, with customers? How do I make customers more successful or more aware of my solution? What would any of you advise that strategic approach? What would you say is important, or how should they go about getting started and picking that right partner?
Yeah, I'll talk, again, maybe in terms of answering this question, I'll also say that, we do have, as I mentioned, some partnerships that are indirect. Outside of the US, we do use some more traditional channel partnerships. And so the answer to this question, my experience is coming from there. I think sometimes, and I know we thought this way too, sometimes looking at really big partners, if you're really small, seems very attractive. And I think one of the things to consider is if that's really the right move. Are you ready for that? Number one, are you ready to scale that fast? And can you support them if that's, and hopefully that would be the effect of having the partnership. But is somebody who's going to be big stay interested in what you're doing, right? If you're not going to move the needle for them. So you can invest a lot of time and energy in a partnership like that, but if you don't move the needle for them, you may very quickly find that you're forgotten. So that's just something to consider. It's always attractive to look at some of the very big partners, but it can also be a mistake if you're not ready.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that people need to remember is, depending on the type of partnerships that you're looking at, these companies may represent lots of other companies, and there might be a lot of competition for mind share when working with them.
Yeah, just to that effect, that we see that today, right, Peter? That we face that challenge as I mentioned. We've got a portfolio of partners, and when you look at the partnerships that we have with Locus Robotics, Fetch Robotics, Geek Plus, and Valio, there's overlap there, right? So, as we proceed forward, we're looking to, number one, again, it's what's in the best interest of the customer. How do we find the best fit solution for that customer? But then how do we balance things when there's almost parity between two different solutions and what's best for that customer? How do we collaborate with the partners to go forward and not just give the customer the best fit solution, but make sure that we're working in the interests of our business and our partners' business as well, right? Because there is overlap there, and that does become one of the the bigger challenges that we face as a solution provider that does have a portfolio of vendor relationships that compete. I think, Peter, that was a very good point.
Excellent. Yeah, that's really helpful. Now, what do you think? This is a tricky question because it's simple on the face, but this is, I think, the devil's in the details. What would you say a good partnership looks like. What makes a partnership a good partnership? And sometimes defining what a bad partnership is or telling a story about a bad partnership might more clearly demonstrate what a good partnership should look like. But yeah, maybe share some of those anecdotes or areas. Who wants to chime in for that?
Well, I'll say something because I've been in the industry for a long time, over 50 years, and partnership's all about honesty with each other, the first and foremost. I mean, you really have to level with what your automation can do, what your technology can do, and your partner has to do the same. And so the two of you really have to get together and decide where to go and what to do together. What's interesting in robots is it's still evolving. John said this before. I think the way the robots are today, that's just stage one. It's robot one. When does second gen come? I think that's what we're really in the process of right now. So it's an ever-changing, quickly moving, especially in logistics field, because that whole world has changed. As e-commerce has come along, micro-fulfillment centers are now the big hot topic, which is having distribution centers that are smaller, closer to population centers. And now in-store order fulfillment. How do you do the, how does a consumer call up a store and say, I want this and that, and how does that order satisfied right away so the customer can come pick it up? So that world has changed. I've been in this for 50 years. I've never seen the pace of change that there is right now. And so how do you keep robots to keep up with that? I really believe a lot of the robot solutions today, as I just said, is just 101. And really the second generation robots are just now starting to be developed. And that's really where our focus has been right now.
Those are great points. And I would say, the relationships have to be mutually beneficial, right? And part of that is being honest with each other, like you said, so that everybody understands what to expect. And particularly for startup companies, and I won't confirm or deny whether we had this issue or not. But again, reaching out to some of these big partners and trying to scale fast, the expectations can be very different, even around things like documentation, right? How good is your documentation, right? Do you have enough spare parts in inventory, right? Can you get the spare parts to those locations fast enough? Because as you mentioned earlier, 99% uptime is usually the expected standard for robotics, right? So you need to make sure that you can support your partner, because the lengths that you are willing to go as the robot company may be very different as the lengths they're willing to go to satisfy the customer. And that's not a criticism of them. They're running a business too, and it has to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, Peter, I think that goes towards cultural fit as well as everything else, right? You might have the two best partners on either side that just don't have a right cultural fit, right? The right technology, the right capability, and it just doesn't work, right? Which the cultural aspect, I think, is critical. But just to echo what Greg and Peter mentioned, and I remember this from a professor many years ago. He said, trust and transparency, T squared, is what it takes to have successful business relationships. And so I think you nailed that on the head, just to say.
Yeah, I'll just add that, it's the commercial and the sales and marketing integration is really important as part of a partnership. But at the end of the day, you have to deliver as well. And so making sure that your operations team, engineering, the two partners, the two companies have a mutual understanding of how they're actually going to, do the work for the customer and put the solution installed and get it in production, right? So when you go through that checklist and you're getting started with a partnership, it's really important to think through, okay, if we actually get further along in this process, are we going to be able to satisfy the customer? And do we have all the tools? And again, back to documentation, like Peter brought up, do we have everything in place to make sure the teams are successful?
Yeah, excellent. And I think you answered, we had a question from the audience. Amanda had asked, what goes into a good partnership, or what qualities you look for in a partner. And I think that the T squared thing was illuminating and resonated for sure. I've got a lot of head nods for that one. And then just a reminder to everyone, we will have some Q&A at the end here. So if you want to use the Zoom Q&A tool to submit your questions, we'll be able to give those directly to the panelists So keep those questions coming. We're seeing a few more come in, so we'll just queue them up and ask them away. But so moving on, right? So we talked about a little bit about your organizations, how you partner, different strategies for partnership, how to get started. So, okay, now that you have partnerships, and all of you do have partnerships, how do you keep those partnerships healthy, right? What goes into, just briefly, right? What are some key things that you could structure in a partnership program that can keep a partnership healthy and growing and evolving together?
What we found, I think is important, is you've got the partnership, which is, I'll say, the first level of the relationship, right? But then you need to build relationships within that company, with the peers, from your company. And one of the things that we do, we insist on, it always is, a negotiating point during the contracting process, but is training, right? And whether your partner should pay for training, right? And where that training should be done. But, it's worth it. You have to insist on training them, insist on having so many of them being trained at, all the time, when whatever number of people is required to support, what the forecasted opportunities are, and that training needs to be repeated on some basis. A lot of the companies don't necessarily like that up front, but it is necessary, and reciprocating, right? So we always build into our agreements that we will spend time in the field with the partners, right? And again, it's a way of just it's cooperation, right? At the one hand, it's sort of monitoring on the other and making sure that things are done the way that you would like to have them done. But it's a way of, I'll say, it maybe continued training. And participation in the process. Show them that you care and you're willing to spend your time with them in the actual process. Maybe you participate in some of the installations or some of the sales calls, et cetera. And we typically will build that right into the contract, and we argue about who's paying for it later. But those are the types of things that we think are important.
Yeah, Peter, I think that is very important. And one thing I've noticed, for better or worse, right, in this young market, the training programs aren't necessarily as robust as, say, an ERP training program, right? Or a conveyance training program, or a WCS training program. There's some that are, rudimentary, basic, and that's not a bad thing. I think it speaks to the nascency of the market and allows, the integrator partners, maybe some of the larger, more mature organizations, to have influence, if you will, in how those organizations design their training protocols. We found that we've been going through, different iterations with different partners, and really seeing the different stages of maturity, if you will, in terms of what their channel strategy is, through the lens of the training programs. But I do think that's incredibly important to success. I think the other thing that we really focus on is a consistent cadence of communication. Right. And even if, a weekly cadence, some folks say, well, nothing's changed in a week. Why do we have to have this Monday 4:30 call every single week? And, quite frankly, it's you want to build a relationship with those folks, whether you're the robotic vendor or you're the integrator partner or whatever role you play in that partnership, because at the end of the day, you also, those partners have other partners, and you want that mind share. So that when whether they're reselling your product or you're buying it from them, they're thinking of you when they're engaging with their customers. Say, I know just the right team to come in and deliver, or I know just the right product to go and get for your project. And I think that steady state, consistent base of communication, whether or not it is on the surface incredibly valuable on a consistent basis, is valuable whether or not you see it.
Yeah, these are great points. Now, something else I think that's interesting about the partnerships. So we've talked a little bit about conceptually and setting them up and how to get them long-term, right, healthy. A lot of that's around communication and messaging and training and supporting those. It's a relationship side. But let's talk about the actual partnership itself, right? The partnership, whether it be a program or a contract or an agreement or something like that. How do you keep the incentive there, right? What are some popular industry demanded incentives, right? That you see a good partner program includes XYZ, right? To make sure that partner is incentivized to bring your solution to market. Anyone have any info there that they can share that might be helpful?
Well, one company I feel that has been very successful in this industry is AutoStore. I was on their US advisory board. They have no direct sales. They do everything through integrators. They actually, all the revenue that they make is basically as a manufacturer. The implementation costs, the support costs, even selling is done by all their integrators. And that requires, first of all, you have to have a superior product that can be implemented by others. And secondly, it's of great value to the integrators because now they're making higher margins than they normally do because they're making it on all aspects of the sale, the initial sale, the implementation, and the support. That's a very unusual model. And at first, when I joined their board, I thought, this is crazy. This is not going to work because I came from a completely different world. It works. And they've had great success with it. And their integrators love them because they really take care of them financially, technology-wise, support and training. So that they're an example that I look at as a company that's really changed a lot of the aspects of the industry and successfully so.
I would add that I think the key thing to keep the partnerships going and keeping the other side of the partnership motivated to utilize your own technology is you've got to reduce the friction, like someone brought up before. If you make it difficult for them to get answers to questions or get engineering support or pull on other parts of the company to support a sale or an ongoing discussion, it's going to fizzle right there. Salespeople will always focus on what they're comfortable with. And if they don't have the support and it's not easy, they'll go back to what's comfortable and it'll start to fizzle.
Yeah, right. Great points. So if we expand on that a little bit, then let's talk. So you've talked about on the sales side, right? So are there, and something I'm curious about, to be honest with you, I've been involved in partnerships. I've been, I worked at a very large enterprise where we had partners and I utilized them in sales. And then I worked on the other side where I worked for the partner and had to leverage the incentive programs and the programs in place. And for end-to-end solutions, it was even more complicated when you add in services and training and the integrations and all things like that. So would you say that something that was really attractive, right, was when there was some type of, when the margin incentives were increased for any particular reason, or when an incentive program came out or a co-marketing program came out where, someone could take our solution to a trade show, right? And there was like a 50-50 split. There were just a lot of really interesting incentive programs that I saw out there. Are there any that sort of capture your attention? Anything that you think is really strategic or a good idea?
I guess I'll jump in there first. I think that's actually a bit of a challenge, been a bit of a challenge, I think, in the AMR space to date. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's a newer area. Right, the robots. I mean, if you look at Locus and Fetch and 6 Rivers and Invia and Gray Orange and Geek Plus, I mean, you're talking 2015, 2016 is when they all sort of had their coming out party. They didn't really start getting pilots until the tail end of 16, early 17. Their first real orders were tail end of 17, 18, and so it's a very nascent market. But now it's a market that is, a rising tide lifts all boats sort of a scenario where there's just so much demand for this technology. The robots are going to sell. It's just a matter of who's going to put it on their paper, unless, of course, you have value add, right? So for me as a partner, yes, I would love the vendors to say, here's some margin incentive, here's some spiffs and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, we talk about margin on every opportunity. We make it work between what the customer needs, what our targets are, and what our vendor partners need. And so that's an ongoing discussion. Yes, it would be fantastic for some of that stuff to happen, but it's not like this is the security appliance industry of the early 2000s, where you're incentivizing your partner sales reps $50 and a gift card to go out and close a couple appliance deals, right? This stuff's selling. And then on top of that, the partners have actually kept somewhat tight ownership, in large part due to the complexity, right? Because in a new market, there's risk if you go out to the channel and you get a poor representation of your product in the market, whether it was designed or implemented or messaged inappropriately. And so there's sort of been, from my experience, some tight fences around how those things have happened. Will that change in the near future? Probably, as the market continues to be more and more competitive and the channel becomes more and more critical as the robotic vendors, are struggling with the same sort of human resource constraints that our customers are and that we are. And the channel provides an opportunity for scale. And that's what the channel is really designed for. And so as the field widens, the vendors will start to look for how do they capture the biggest piece of that pie. And perhaps that will happen. I haven't seen it to date.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? In terms of how to compare it, right, to other types of industry programs or what you're seeing in terms of adoption. It's with them, you're talking about market trends and what the customers are demanding, right? So the incentive seems like it's built into the partnership, both in one, the organizations spend the time with each other and they've invested the time and the resources to invest in each other. And at the end of the day, the customers want these solutions. And so, whoever can take it forward should take it forward, and that's incentive enough. Okay, well, you touched on actually we're going to wrap up here with our final question, which was I wanted to see if you could all share with the increase in automation that's been occurring over the past several years, the accelerated bump caused by the pandemic. What kind of industry trends are you seeing in your businesses, right? In terms of this space, are we going to slow down? Are things going to pick up pace? It could be related to partnerships or industry. What are some of your thoughts as you reflect on this market?
I can start. From our perspective at Lucas, we see it picking up big time. So there's been a couple of drivers, especially in the warehousing and distribution space, which we're focused on, around labor shortages, the mass exodus of unskilled labor in the marketplace. Also people thinking about how they can be flexible and compete head to head against other companies that are fighting for the same talent pools, especially in warehousing where Amazon keeps popping up new DCs in every metro area or in every neighborhood, including my own in Lawrenceville. It's becoming really important to minimize your need for people to make your operation run. It's just it's a risk that people are evaluating. And so any automation technology that is out there, people are considering. And robotics, like we were talking about back in 2015, it was just sort of taking off in the space. Now people are really starting to see, the use cases, the case studies, the success stories. It's become less and less of, mind share and more about the economics and ROI, and I can get this in and pay for it in less than 3 years. So people are really serious about it, and it's capturing a lot of attention of our customers, especially at the higher levels, even the C-suite. People want to get started in robotics so they have even a compelling story for their own customers that they're staying on the cutting edge. So I see it taking off. Again, it's all about the capabilities and the value of the solutions and the hardware, et cetera. So we're seeing it mature and seeing the value there. So I see it growing, definitely.
I agree with Justin. It's evolving from a nice to have technology to a must have technology. And it's for all those reasons that Justin just said. It's just the world is changing very quickly here. Labor is just, that's probably the number one issue that is facing most companies. And it even doubles so when you're inside a warehouse or distribution center, which is not a fun place to work. It's just very difficult to get people there. And I think every company realizes they're going to have to invest. So I've never seen the investment the way it is right now. Even the expectations on ROI is changing. I can remember back in the day, it better be 6 months, maybe a year. Now it's acceptable 18 months, 24 months. Is because it's now considered more of an investment for the long term than rather a short-term return. So it is changing quite quickly right now. Again, I've been in this industry for a long time and I've never seen it like that. That's why I'm still in it, because I love this pace of change. It makes the whole thing exciting. So this is a fun industry to be in right now. There's no doubt about it, because I think we're just at the start of the growth.
Absolutely. I concur. It's, we're seeing, strong changes in the labor market. Obviously, there's a lack of availability of certain kinds of labor. Wages are going up, which obviously helps the ROI. I mean, we've traditionally done strongly in certain parts of the country that had higher labor rates than others. Now everybody else is catching up, and we're starting to see that effect. Particularly in the areas where we work in the hotels and hospitals, where people have tended to be on the lower end of some of those scales, particularly in some parts of the country. And then in addition to the financial ROI, which, is always key when people are talking about robotics, we're starting to see a lot of interest in them because of the contactless solutions that we can provide, particularly in those public spaces that we work in that I mentioned before, the hospitals and the hotels. It's actually becoming part of their strategy to reduce touches along the way by using robotics. So yeah, definitely good tailwinds that we're seeing, and we've waited a long time for.
And I guess I'll add here, right? Something for context. The fastest growth market, I think we'll all agree, is warehousing and fulfillment operations, right? That's where we've historically seen a high degree of non-value added movement of material. And as Greg pointed out, the labor constraint. For context, globally, and don't quote me on the number. It's a very small number. I saw a report recently. It's 3% or 5% of warehouses have this technology deployed. Once you stop and think about that for a minute, 3 to 5% of the worldwide market, of the total addressable market, has this technology deployed. So I think saying we're high growth should be an understatement. We are at the what really is the sort of upward curve of hockey stick growth, and we're seeing that the customers that we've deployed this technology with have already. We've been doing this for 2 years now at Kerber. We're already in second iterations with the customers that we've deployed for, and adding scale into their environments. And so, Greg and Peter, you both pointed out, and I think Justin as well, the labor constraint is the number one driver, but that has been the driver since before we got here, since before this technology was an option. I'm hearing the same thing that you both mentioned there, that customers, while ROI is still very important, are willing to look back. We had a conversation last week with a customer, and they said, if it's under 24 months, it's okay, because the ROI isn't the driving force for us. It's operational continuity. We need to make sure we can get the units out the door that the customers are demanding, and we can't do that with the lack of labor that we see today. So we have to make this investment in order to keep the lights on. So it's just sort of a changing dynamic in market opportunity that, who knows if it'll continue, but it's sort of a perfect storm for the AMR market.
Yeah, thanks for all those perspectives. Those were, I think, really astute observations, very helpful, very intriguing too. So we're now in the portion of the discussion where we're going to take some questions from the audience. So for those of you who have been holding on to your questions, no need, go ahead and submit them into the Q&A section. I have a couple here queued up, so I'll just go ahead and this is just for anyone. I think there's no one specifically called out in these questions. So Deepan wanted to ask, if it's a very small company, maybe with an interesting, some interesting technology, and they're just looking for a first pilot, how would you best propose such a collaboration to the larger players? And they specifically are asking about in the field, such as WES providers and other players. Does anyone have any advice for that one?
I can get start. So WES standing, I'm assuming they mean warehouse execution system, which is something that Lucas provides in the context of when people are talking about other automation technologies plugging into the warehouse. I think a pilot is the best way to get started. And so typically as part of a pilot, that means you want to look for the lowest cost solution to get started and prove out the value. And so you may end up doing some things around the integration that isn't in a final state, or you may make compromises on the workflow, or maybe you just go for a small segment of what you're looking to automate. But really people are just trying to prove out the value and believe that, hey, I can make this work for the entire operation without taking all that risk up front with a big investment only to get to the other side of it and perhaps deal with a messy situation. So I think it's about working through the details and understanding what you're willing to compromise with. And then of course, if they already have people that are familiar with the technology and they've got a layer that they can integrate with, like our system, for instance, we can just plug in and make it easier for them.
If I could just supplement that, but we get this question all the time, right? To be honest, there's a lot of emerging players in this space. The key thing is, I think, for an emerging vendor that's looking to, get an opportunity with a partner is, what's your point of differentiation? What do you do that no one else in the market can do? And you have to have a very strong message there. And then the other thing that I think personally is very important is being able to very clearly articulate what does the customer look like and what is the problem that they have that you can solve with your technology, and how do you solve it? If you can draw that line and say, Mr. Wes provider, you have customers that look like this. We know they have this problem. We have the solution for that problem. Let's partner. That greases the skids a bit.
I would also add, and again, I don't know if this is the exact nature of the question, but what can you bring to the table, right? Do you have a customer in mind that you've worked with that wants your part of the solution, that uses a particular WES, and they can approach that company on your behalf? That's, frankly, I mentioned the elevator controller issue earlier. That's how we got to that. We like to think of ourselves as a big company in some ways, and there's a lot of big companies and many that are bigger than us, but that's how we approached that elevator company, was through a customer who owned a lot of buildings and a lot of elevators and was interested in our part of the solution and was looking for a lower friction integration point at the elevator. And they helped to promote those conversations.
Excellent. I think the next questions we have are sort of all along the same line. So they're asking about, I think, different partnership opportunities. So Charlene is asking about is there an opportunity for translation solutions company to partner with a robotics company? And I think, for example, from the initial software to documentation to training, is there an interest in this or an opportunity in this, or how would you address that?
Maybe I'll answer again. Maybe being in the public space maybe might be the most relevant for us. Currently, we don't offer any solutions that are listening. But we do have our robots do speak, so to speak. And we do provide robots that will speak in multiple languages, depending on where we're deploying them and what the customer has asked for. But it's an interesting question because we are looking at opportunities to add some functionality, I'll say, in the listening space. And obviously, given the wide coverage where we've deployed our robots, certainly robots could be, or people that we would encounter might be speaking different languages. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, yeah. And then we've got a question from Molly here. And is training a large part of your business model when you sell hardware or software, right? So do a lot of your resources focus on training workers and how to use the equipment? Do you ever partner with maybe someone, educationally, whether it be a university or some type of training partner that helps to train the workforce to adopt it?
I can start. A big part of what we do is change management. So these projects where we're implementing our technology or other automation technology alongside ours, change management's a big part of it. And to the point someone made earlier about wanting to protect, their name in the marketplace and making sure that the customer has a good experience, that becomes really important. So from a Lucas's perspective, we typically don't outsource that work because that's part and parcel to the project work that our teams do with our project managers and project engineers that go on site to support customers with training and go live.
Yeah, and I'll just add, that is a big part of the end of any project is, we train the trainer, whether it's a software or a robotic-based solution. You need the resources on hand. Granted, there's always maintenance and support agreements. There's always, the support line that you can call, but if you don't give the customer the, functional knowledge of how to use the systems, I mean, that you've got to be in a position to hand that stuff off to the user, or at least hand it off to a group of super users that can then take ownership at the customer side. I think that's a critical aspect of any software or hardware project.
Yeah. And then the final question we have here is, what is the best way to structure the contract for your partnership, right? Do you use an LOI, an MOU, something bigger? How would you say, or you've seen, or you'd advise the actual paperwork, the partnership contract?
Well, I've seen it all. And from a handshake to a contract that's probably 300 pages long. It really varies. It depends on what's important to both companies. I mean, if you're looking to really develop something together, then that's very much a different type of contract. You're protecting IP rights and you're protecting, what you develop and co-develop. Then there's really just strictly the marketing and sales approach. These are more finished products and more mature products, and now you're dealing with the sales end of it and the promotional end of it. So it really it depends on where you are in the company's cycle, maturity cycle, and I think where in also the industry itself, because right now robotics, especially I think in the logistics, it's still, as I said earlier, I think robotics won. I think really the next wave of robotics, John said it, a lot of the current leaders right now came out in 2016, 2017. I think there's going to be a whole flock of guys coming out now in 2022, 2023. That's probably more the generation 2 variety. And but there's still risk on that. And so you have to cover the risk on both sides in a relationship. So that's part of the contract as well. So it really varies with all those different conditions. The best one is both sides it's mutually beneficial. Both sides' risk are covered, that, one is not exposed and the other is. And so you really have to be careful how you structure these things, that it makes sense that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it does. It definitely depends. But these are all fantastic. So I want to thank you all very much for your perspectives and your feedback and your stories and your advice. This was really an exciting discussion for me, just because I've done partnerships on the sales side, and they're so valuable and they're so important, especially in this emerging space where things can get a little complicated. So, but so I just want to thank you for your time. Joel, would you like to step in?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. I will jump back in. I enjoy sitting sometimes in the background. I learned so much, and I knew that I would with this panel. I want to thank everybody for their time. Several takeaways, just 2 things of note. When people think and talk about partnerships all the time, but I think what we learn here is that put some time in understanding the type of partnership you're pursuing. It could be different depending upon your outcome, whether your objective is based on innovation or channel development, whether you're working with a hardware partner or a software partner. So be purposeful and put that time into it like you do all other things in your business. I'll take a little risk here. Sometimes I refer to sales and business development and also fundraising using the marriage analogy. You have to date before you pop the question and get to know someone. I think this is interesting because once you're married, we're talking about partnerships, right? You guys mentioned a lot of important characteristics in successful relationships: being transparent, being honest, putting time in, and not taking things for granted, in the partnership. Having regular modes of communication, deep level of respect, and making sure that both parties are benefiting mutually. Also, we got to manage the finances and make sure all the appropriate incentives, are there. And to Greg's point, it's always exciting when we're growing. So always looking for those new opportunities to grow for both partners. So again, thank you, Jen. Really appreciate it. Thanks for leading us in this conversation. Great job. Greg, really good seeing you again. I've enjoyed working with you in the past, and I was thankful that you were able to join us. And John, likewise, congratulations of what you're doing at Corber, and good luck continuing to push the industry forward. And Peter, it's really great having you here. Aethon has been in the community for a long time now. You're one of our success stories, and I think we want to make sure you get the recognition you deserve across the entire industry. I know you are directly in your market, but real proud to have you as a Pittsburgh company. And Justin, finally, thank you very much for participating in the conversation. Lucas, also a successful Pittsburgh company in its market segment. And we want to thank you and your team for supporting the PRN and for this event today. To our listeners, this is a panel that represents some of the top leaders in our industry, and the PRM will look forward to bringing additional folks to have more conversations. So just want to remind everybody this was recorded, so if you want to reference it or share it with other colleagues or other people in your network, we will share that information with you. And again, we want to encourage everybody to get involved. If you have any questions, reach out to us. You can always contact us at info@robopgh.org. Thank you to our audience and the panel again. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.